Hey, welcome to the 5th gathering of the Guild Meetup. Today, Nikolay Advolodkin will take us on a quest to discover 3 tips to change your automation forever. That's his title, not mine. We'll see if he actually delivers on that. So really excited to have Nikolay with us. But first, some things I just want you to know about before we begin our journey. To make this fun for everyone, please participate. That's the only thing I ask. And the way to participate is just in the chat. Click on the chat and we can chat among ourselves. And if you have a question for Nikolay, just click on the questions tab and I will ask your question to Nikolay live. So those are 2 ways you can help make this a really cool event for everyone. And just so you know, we do have a code of conduct, even though this is an online event. And if you want to know more about that, you just have to go to guildconferences.com/code. And really, you can just boil it down to be awesome to one another. It's a guild. I never have issues, so that's just a disclaimer. And a big shout out to Testum. This edition of the TestGuild Meetup is sponsored by Testum. Testum wanted to give back to the community during this time of need, so make sure to check out their free community plan, which now includes 1,000 runs per month. The runs last forever, but the offer won't, so sign up below. There'll be a little button below. Click on that, show some love, because they help sponsor the event. So for those that don't know, Nikolay is a self-driven SDET on a lifelong mission to create profound change in the IT world and ultimately leave a legacy for his loved ones, community, and the world at large. Today he serves as the CEO and test automation instructor at ultimateqa.com. If you do anything with automation, especially with C# or Java, I think he has a new Java course, definitely want to check that out at ultimateqa.com. He's really a highly rated instructor. He's been doing it for years, so definitely give him some love. He's also a senior solution architect at Source Labs, so he also speaks with a lot of clients, a lot of customers, so he has a lot of great insight around that as well. And he was voted, I believe, the top automation engineers in the world multiple years in a row by TechBeacon. I think I actually wrote that article, so I can definitely vouch for him. He also contributed to books such as the Continuous Testing DevOps book. I think I have it on my bookshelf somewhere, so really great to have Nikolay here. So get ready. He's about to be live, and we're about to go live, Nikolay. Get ready. Hey, Nikolay. Welcome to the Guild. And I can't hear him. Ah! Let me see if it's going on. Be right back, all. Just make sure my settings are correct here. Nikolay. Anything? I hear static. There you go. Yes. Awesome. Hey, so welcome to the Guild.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Joe. That was a phenomenal introduction.
Yeah, so great. Yeah, people have been really excited about this talk. I think I just started promoting it yesterday, and we already have like 250 people sign up for it. So I think it's a really good title. So just take it away. The Guild Hall is yours.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I know it's Friday afternoon, so hopefully I'm not getting in the way of anyone this weekend. But thanks for joining me for the 3 simple tips to change your automation forever. A lot of them are actually, it's nice that Joe reached out to me because I kind of have been working on them recently, kind of some pretty new revelations. One of them is not so new, but the other ones are pretty new. So I'm hoping to share, provide some thoughts, and maybe change some minds and change the way some people think. So Joe already pretty much covered everything about me. One cool thing that I want to mention is I am a solutions architect at Source Labs, which gives me a really awesome perspective into the world of test automation, because before I was just automating at my companies, whatever I was working on, leading teams, and that gives you a small overview of the automation industry. But then now the fact that I get to work with clients literally all over the entire world and help them with their test automation efforts, it gives me much bigger problems and challenges that I see happening literally all over the world. So that's kind of cool, and that's where I try to bring my insight from to tackle those most prominent challenges. And most importantly, I'm an animal lover. So one of my 3 tips. This one is pretty recent that I actually got from a conversation with my colleague Titus Fortner. If you're not familiar with him, check him out. He's lead maintainer of the Selenium Ruby bindings. And this one is about testing for page load in UI automation is actually redundant. Let's talk about why. So when people open a web page, what are the possible errors that can occur? I guess if you want to use the chat at this point and throw it out, I don't know if Joe can pass that along to me. I'm curious
absolutely.
about feedback.
There is a 30-second delay, Nikolay, but folks, if you can just chat anything that Nikolay may need, make it more interactive, that'd be awesome. So Nikolay, the question again, so they can get it?
Yeah, sure. The question is on the screen, but I will repeat.
You're not sharing the screen. I don't see it.
You see it, Joe?
I don't see your screen.
Oh, man. Thanks for... I'm glad we solved that problem.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were just going to go full camera.
No. Yeah, I have a little something to show. Can you see it now, Joe?
Yes. Awesome. So the question is, what's the question?
The question is, when we open a web page, what are the possible errors that can occur?
All right, Guild. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer this before we get going. I should have some music playing, but I don't. Maybe next time. But what is some possible errors that can occur when you open a web page? That's the question. All you need to do is go to the questions tab and just type in your answer. So, like I said, there's a 30-second delay, so it'll be, someone says page not found. Another one says 404 error. 404 error, says Eve. Blizzard and Buffalo, as we rephrase it here. White page. So a white page, says Chris. Page does not load, says Garesh. Network latency, elements load slowly, is another one. No internet, seasonal timeout. Well, this guild is awesome. Look at everyone answer. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Sai. Leo, thank you. All right, I think those are some good ones. What do you think, Nikolay?
I absolutely think those are good ones. And yeah, you guys pretty much captured everything that can go wrong with a page opening, which is really server errors and front-end errors, right? Either something is up with the server and the page is unresponsive, or something is up with the front end and if someone said a white page or a broken page comes up. Okay, so keep that in mind, because whenever we have to start doing automation for a page load, my question is, how do we tackle for checking of the server errors? Well, we check for those using API tests, right? So if we want to make sure that our page the server is not down, we do a web request on a specific URL and we get back a 200 response that tells us that the page is up, or we get back a 500, or we get back a 400 that tells us that something is up with our back end. Now, so that resolves this first potential problem that can occur with our UI, with our pages opening. The second problem, that's where something like UI test automation comes in, right? Selenium WebDriver, Cypress, whatever you're using. This is where we're checking for these kinds of errors right here. So let's take a look at this test right here. This is using Selenium WebDriver and Java. This is just because Java is the most popular programming language for Selenium, but applies to all programming languages. In this test right here, okay, we're creating our driver, navigating to this URL, and then asserting that this element is displayed. Now, this element doesn't exist. So in this case, what exception will our test get? This is open to the public as well.
All right, once again, what exception will this code get? Hopefully everyone could see it. I did there's an option on my computer where I can shop in the screen, and hopefully you can see this because I see it pretty well on my screen. So once again, I'm going to give you 30 to 40 seconds to answer because there's a 30-second delay. Sai says, no such element found exception. That's one answer. Keep them coming.
That is the answer, Saeed. Saeed is the winner.
Yeah, and also Frederico on YouTube said the same thing. Thank you, guys. Absolutely.
Great call, gentlemen. Yeah, that's exactly right. No such element exception. Okay, so this test is checking for a page render, right, that a page is loaded. Now, how about this test? Get driver, navigate to a URL, here we're finding an element, and then we're starting to send keys to it to be able to log in. And of course, same exact element as the previous test. What exception will this test get?
All right, Guild, what exception will this get? I'm going to put it full screen for you all. Give you about 30 seconds to answer. So what exception would this code get you? How about you, Frederico? You still there? Sai? No element found exception? No PE. Don't know what that is. Let's see. This one I'm not sure it's so obvious to the guild.
Okay, no worries. If I can answer it, I guess, if no one wants to answer it.
One more second, just give him a little more time to warm up here. Null point exception with Sai. Garesh says null point exception. Dave says not clickable. Eric says element not interactable. So those are the guesses.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, I am super happy about those answers because I know my tip is awesome, because this will actually get you the same exact exception as the previous test. The element doesn't exist, so the find element is going to try to find element. It's not going to be found, so you're going to get a no such element exception. And I can actually show you that. Nice. I'm happy many people didn't get it. We can look at some code here. Let's look at this test. Here is my test, and let's run it. Give it a second. I didn't prepare the code to be executable before I should have, but you know, technical issues.
No problem. That's why it's a live test guild. That's what makes it fun.
Exactly.
I don't know if you can increase the font on that by any chance.
I absolutely can, Joe.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Oh. So it's really interesting because I'm on a Windows VM here on my Mac, so I always forget all the commands that translate from Mac to Windows to be Windows commands, you know? Like command is like control and control is like command. Yeah,
right.
I can do it this way. Let's see here. Yeah, normally I do it with my mouse and keyboard, but it's not translating to my Windows VM. So let me come here. Oh, I was already there. My font, maybe 24. Let's see. Hopefully it's not too big. Nice. Is that better?
Yes. Much
awesome.
better.
There you go. So we're going to run this test just to prove to you all that I'm not making stuff up. You know what I think is going to happen? I think my driver might be out of date.
Oh, no.
It's going to suck if it is. But it'll be a quick fix. You guys will watch me fix live errors.
Perfect.
Hopefully that's okay. Yeah, I bet I knew it. Let me see here. Execution failed. Yeah, my driver, I think let me check here. My Windows driver is probably out of date. Let me double check. Yeah.
So would you tell your clients at Sauce Labs how to fix this? Well, it's already updated automatically on Sauce Labs, right?
Oh, sorry, which part, Joe?
So is there a way to automatically update your driver? Isn't there like a Java plugin?
There is. I wasn't prepared for that. I need to. I was gonna go, but this week is so crazy with like presentations because I got you, and then next week I got the Sauce Con.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So I had to take shortcuts. You know, I couldn't be as efficient as I wanted to be.
Oh, you're awesome. This is great. Live demo.
Yeah, absolutely live demo.
Well, you know what? There may be some beginners that don't even know this, that you need to update your driver, and this is how you do it. You're watching it live.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, so you know what happens sometimes is, well, actually with Chrome driver all the time, is that Chrome driver automatically updates. See, I even open it up and it's already up to date. But because I have a binary in my solution, because I'm trying to run it locally, that binary is out of date, and so now trying to run it, it's not working. So I have to download a new one, and I need to download the Windows one. So let me show you that. Downloading it, and then I'm going to extract it, and then I'm going to throw it into my IntelliJ project. Let me extract it. Yeah, in the future, there's a better solution out there we can actually use to automatically update your packages. Get out of here. So here's my executable. I'm going to just take it here and drag it over to my Windows folder. And yeah, let's refactor that. Yeah, let's override it. Cool, that should do it.
Perfect.
Fingers crossed for live execution. Let's run it. Interesting. Surprised it's not working.
This is beautiful.
It's trying to run my Mac. That's why. My bad. Oh yeah. Let me see here.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's trying to run my Mac. My bad, everyone. There we go. I will just grab this, put it over here, comment that. There we go. All right, lessons in Chrome driver management. That's why it's a pain. That's why I prefer using a cloud vendor, not to be promoting any cloud vendors or anything, but you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. You know, like there you go. See, kind of manage it for you. So using a cloud vendor, Sauce Labs, or any other one you prefer makes this life easy. But anyway, so this test failed, right? So failed, and let's check out the exception. No such element exception, as expected. So now this other one over here, which was this test. Right here, the smarter test, we couldn't figure out that it was a no such element exception, but let's show that it was a no such element exception. Cool, so failed and no such element exception, same exact exception. So my point of this whole 10 sidetrack, which hopefully was a little bit helpful as well, was that this assertion was absolutely pointless. In fact, this entire test is absolutely unnecessary, because if we just write this test on its own without any assertion for checking a page load, the end result is going to be exactly the same. So we can all save ourselves from having to write page load tests, and just by simply having a test that proceeds with the actions as it should, you'll save yourself a test and you'll save yourself extra code in that you don't have to write extra assertions. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. And before I go on my next tip, I'll leave it open to some questions there.
All right, Gilt. So if you have any questions before Nikolay proceeds, as I mentioned, I don't think YouTube has a delay, but I think my main system does. So if you have a question for Nikolay on this tip before we get going in the next one, just leave it in the chat, and I will let Nikolay know. Great tip. Anytime you can write less code, I'm a big advocate of that, because less code, less less problems, right? More code, more problems for sure. So Nikolay, who'd you learn this from? You learned it from Titus?
Yeah, Titus. Me and Titus had an excellent conversation, and yeah, talking about just kind of tests and stuff. And then he was like, "Yeah, I don't test for Pedro," and I was like, "Huh? Why?" And then we talked about it. And I was like, "Wow, it makes absolute sense."
Very nice. All right, Guild. I'm gonna proceed unless anyone has any chat or questions here. Just so you know, there is a chat feature. So there's a questions. So you had a question you want me to ask Nikolay officially, click on that questions, or you could put it in the chat. I'm monitoring both. So just let me know before we continue. Just want to make sure everyone's on board and they get that first tip. All right, Nikolay. Seems like everyone seems to get it, so I'd say continue.
Perfect. So I hope that means that nobody's going to write the page load test anymore.
All right.
Cool. All right, let's talk about another one. TestNG versus JUnit. Now, this is an old one for me, but I find that for a lot of people, they actually don't know this. And so let's talk about it. That TestNG actually isn't natively thread safe. What that means is that if you want to do parallelization with TestNG, it is not that straightforward. You actually have to think about how to manage your threads. And so my suggestion to all of us is, why are we using TestNG if one of the most important aspects of test automation, which is parallelization, doesn't work out of the box? You have to know thread safety. And let me show you that in some actual code as well. So here I have a JUnit test and a TestNG test that I put side by side, and let's actually just compare them. Let me see here. TestNG. Cool. So here they both are side by side. On the left-hand side, you can see my JUnit test that runs in parallel. And on the right-hand side, I have my TestNG test that runs in parallel. By the way, if you don't know, to run them both in parallel, we use Maven Surefire plugin. I can show you that POM XML afterwards. But take a look at all the extra code that's required to make TestNG work in parallel. So remember, I said it's not thread safe. So, sorry. So I was trying to highlight here. So what you actually have to do is start using thread local. And so you have to make any instance variables of your classes as thread local. So in this case, I have one little class. And so my driver now has to be thread local. And also you now have to introduce a method that's going to retrieve that driver instance through a driver.get. And so now you can see that before this was my JUnit test, how kind of it looked, right? The standard, you have your class instance variable, and then you just use it in the class. However, with TestNG, you can't do that because you have to use a thread local, you have to get the instance, and now you have to start doing stuff like this where you're getting the instance of the driver, here you're getting the driver instance and quitting. So I actually had to, after I did my JUnit test, I had to go through and update all of these calls to my driver just to make TestNG work in parallel. And again, I mentioned to you, this is only like four tests here that I have in a single file. Imagine a lot of us actually, when we start out doing test automation, we don't think about parallelization from the start, which we absolutely should. I recommend everybody to think from parallelization from the start, meaning you write two tests. The very first thing you should do is try to parallelize them. It may be hard, it may be easy, but you should make them run in parallel. And the reason why is because imagine if you wrote out your code and your framework and you got to 100 tests. And then you say, my tests are now taking too long because they're taking 1 hour to execute. I'm going to parallelize. But you wrote your code like this, as any normal Java developer would. We wrote our code as such. And now when we try to parallelize, if we wanted to introduce TestNG, we're going to have to modify so much code by adding thread locals to all of our instance variables, by replacing these calls to the class variable to instance variables instead throughout all of our code. And it can be a huge pain in the butt. and not done well, if we don't understand thread safety well, it can crash our entire automation framework or cost us a lot of time to refactor. So that's my kind of spiel here is keep it simple, keep it simple, stupid, meaning that why introduce the extra complexity when it's totally unnecessary? JUnit will work normally. I'll show you. Just all you literally have to do to have JUnit run in parallel is you add the Maven Surefire plugin. Give me a second here. Here it is, Maven Surefire plugin, right here. Okay, and that's it. You add that. You can choose your parallelization method, whether you want to run in methods or classes or everything. You can set your thread count, and then using Maven, it'll automatically run in parallel. But for TestNG, not only do you have to do that, you also have to modify code. So why are we doing that?
All right, Nikolay, this is a little more controversial, I think.
Of course it is. People
So,
love TestNG.
Yes, so a few people have comments, and the main comment is, let me read them to you, get your input here. Oleski says, it's easy to do in, I guess in the TestNG XML, there's a parallel methods thread count equals 2 that works well locally. That's supposed to help run in parallel. Also, Sai says, I think WebDriver is not thread safe. TestNG is providing more parallel runs through parallel attribute. Can we discuss about this if we got some time after the presentation? So, I'm just curious to know, what, so are you saying not to use TestNG? I guess there was a reason people did start using TestNG one time. And that's because JUnit wasn't up to speed with TestNG. But now it seems like with the new release of JUnit, they're pretty much even.
Yeah, you got it exactly right, Joe. Was back in the day, TestNG was ahead of JUnit, absolutely. And so people started using TestNG, and it was the more popular framework. However, from what I've heard, one of my coworkers, actually Marcus Merrill, super knowledgeable about Java, he's been doing it his whole career, told me that at some point the people from TestNG kind of stopped taking feedback, stopped being very supportive of the community, and they started falling behind. JUnit got ahead. And so now JUnit has all the features that TestNG has, and it can run natively in parallel without doing extra work. So that is the main piece here. They're apples to apples, but we don't need to pick the apple that's entangled in a plastic wrap and a cardboard box hidden inside of a car in order to get that apple out. We have now two options, and one of them is easier to use than the other. So I'm recommending that we use JUnit if we want to more simply do parallelization for our test automation, which is absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you can, I know this is a very controversial topic. People love TestNG. Totally fine. If you think it's easy to do parallelization and you can do thread safety normally, that's awesome. Great job. Keep using it, no problem. But for anyone that is trying to decide what to do, any beginner that's trying to pick up a new framework or is learning Java, JUnit is your lowest barrier to entry to success.
So, Nikolay, I guess a few other questions. Gresh wants to know, I think JUnit makes this easier. How can you group test cases in JUnit?
Well, what do you mean by group test cases?
Group test cases in JUnit. Gresh, can you ask this? How can we group test cases in JUnit? Gresh, if you have more info, just provide it.
Yeah.
Sai says, also, Nikolay, maybe this question is a little bit out of context. What is the better reporting tool plugin to show parallel test run results? So I guess, does TestNG have any better reporting for parallel results, or is JUnit just the same?
I personally like alert reports.
Yeah.
So you can use that. There's another one I wanted to check out. I forget what it's called, but they seem pretty cool as well. They have like a web-based reporting tool. But to be frank, I don't do a lot of execution locally anymore because I just only pretty much use either like cloud vendors or containers. So all my reporting lives either in my CI system or in my cloud execution platform. So I don't personally find there a need to be and have any kind of HTML reports because it's all there and it's done for me all automatically without me having to do any extra work. So I'm always just a believer, keep it as simple as possible. Like if tools are already providing me reporting capabilities, I'm just going to use that. So I'm not a strong, like, I don't have strong preferences on reporting tools.
Gotcha. I do like using Serenity. Serenity has really nice reports, and it's like a wrapper on top of everything. I've always enjoyed that. I guess the Garesh said, be able to group things like smoke and regression test. I know in Serenity I could tag things as regression and smoke, and that at the command line I could just pass it the D tag and the tag name, and it would just run tests that had that tag. Any thoughts how to run groups of tests like that, Nikolay, in JUnit?
Yeah, I personally don't group my tests. I usually will either run tests using, as you said, kind of D test Maven parameters, right?
Yep.
D test and run a certain class, or run a bunch of classes together. But normally, again, maybe this is more advanced than some people want the answer, but I usually run all my tests all the time because they run so fast and they're so stable that I don't need to pick smoke versus regression. My tests will execute in like a few minutes maximum, so I never need to pick tests. They all just run all the time, so the tagging thing is kind of irrelevant to me.
All right, so I know you have one more tip, but people seem to like this TestNG thing. I know in TestNG there's an option to retry, and I know based on our podcast you would probably freak out that someone was retrying things, but does JUnit have an option to retry on failure?
Amazing. You guys are killing my JUnit knowledge here. So I am good with using JUnit, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert, especially with all of these features. And as Joe already knows, one of my other tips, I guess I'll throw out an extra tip here, is I actually don't recommend retries in test automation. You can listen to Joe Colantonio's Test Automation Guild. Me and him got into a pretty good discussion, not Test Automation Guild, Test Talks podcast. We got into a pretty good discussion there, my most recent one, but I'll quickly tell you guys about it. So what retries do, we just kind of, what retries hint at, right, is that our automation is not trustworthy. Hence, I'm going to add retry logic because I know that the first time my test fails, it's not right. I'm going to add retry logic to fix it. So that's, I think, a wrong mental mindset to have for us as automation engineers. I think the first mindset should be, if our test fails, our question should be, why did it fail? And most likely it should either be a bug or a requirements change. Now, since I've taken that hard stance, I realize there are some interesting situations where retries are acceptable, and that's when we're using third-party services. For example, a third-party service, Amazon, Google, any other third-party service can go down, right? In which case, if we're relying on them for executing our test automation, our test can fail. In which case, it could be acceptable to retry, especially if it's related to network latency, but that's more of an exception rather than the rule. So after all of that said, I don't use retries on any of my tests. So I never have done it with JUnit or TestNG for that matter.
Once again, not a promo for Serenity, but I think there is an option. They have a Serenity text file that you can do a retry if need be. So just check it out. Don't know. Also, I know WebDriver. I don't know if WebDriver has one, actually. Anyway, Nikolay, let's continue then. I think it looks like TestNG questions have died down a little.
Cool. Sounds good. Oh, and just I guess to share another kind of piece of experience. Usually, when I do set up my retries, I actually do it as part of my CI pipeline. So something that I found was kind of useful was I'll have my CI pipeline determine the percentage of failures, and usually if my pipeline exceeds more than 10% of failures, then I will classify that as something weird happened. Why did 10% of my tests fail? And then I'll have my pipeline retry. So I don't configure it from the code side. I configure it from continuous integration side.
Absolutely. And I personally love retries just because I think anyway, we won't get into it. Check out the podcast because Nikolay and I go into it there. So
yeah,
Nikolay.
These are my opinions from experience. You can use them if you like. Hopefully it's helpful. If you don't use it, that's okay too. You can even talk to me here or anywhere else you want to find me. We can have these conversations. I love having these conversations. All right, cool. Third tip. Let's go. So the third tip is most optimal strategy for involving manual testers in Cucumber. So I want to start here by giving a warning that nobody in the Cucumber community encourages having manual testers doing Cucumber automation. The automation of Cucumber should happen between the three amigos, the automation engineer or manual tester, the dev, and the BA. Those three come together to write scenarios, and then those scenarios get implemented either by automation engineers or developers. And we do behavior-driven development, okay? That's standard industry practice. However, I do know, just working from my experience with many larger clients, what they unfortunately try to do is they have all these manual testers sitting around and they're like, oh, this automation thing, it's so great. Why don't we try to push all these manual testers into doing automation without providing them any training whatsoever, and let's have them try to do software development activities without training them in software development. Or the nice pitch is that, right, the manual testers can write the feature files, which are not technical at all, and then the technical people can do the technical stuff, okay? So this is what I'm going to discuss is, if we're going to go that route, even though it's not recommended, let's at least talk about what is the best approach for that. And so I've created this diagram here about the process of involving a manual tester into test automation with Cucumber. So this is the standard kind of very large companies try to do this approach. They'll have the manual tester that will code the scenario in a feature file, right? The assumption here is the feature file is not technical at all. So the manual tester can write these scenarios, and then our automation experts will implement it, right? So once that happens, the question is, who will create that step definition? It'll either be manual testers or SDETs. And then from there, if page objects exist, the test is ready for production. If the page object don't exist, the technical person, which will say SDET or developer, needs to create that page object to support that behavior-driven design that was just created, okay? So the problem here is, notice all these bubbles that I'm adding. All these bubbles represent overhead. What's the problem with overhead? Well, it requires time to get training, and then overhead, of course, if not done well over time, can actually lead the code to rot, right? It can kill projects. More overhead will kill projects. So if we're following this approach, if a manual tester is going to code the scenarios in a feature file, they're going to acquire light IDE training, because in order to work in a feature file, they need to know how to use it, a little bit of an IDE, how to open it up, how to navigate through it. They'll also require framework training, because they will need to know how to execute feature files, or they will at least need to know you can't just throw feature files in a random folder, right? You have to put them in a specific place. So this is automation-related overhead. And here's Cucumber-related overhead, Cucumber BDD-related overhead. They will need to require good Gherkin training, because if you're going to write Cucumber, you have to be trained in Gherkin syntax, right? For example, given, when, then. You have to have a given followed by a when followed by a then. That is some of the rules. Some other rules, you should write in third person. There's all these kind of rules that we need to learn. And then we also need to learn about the Cucumber features training, right? There's a difference between a scenario outline and a scenario context and a table in Cucumber. So they need to know that, because if they're going to be writing these scenarios, they have to know how to use the features of the tool. So next part here, the manual testers. If they're going to be creating the step definitions, which means they're actually going to be writing some code that has theoretically been implemented for them already, or they're going to be just writing pseudocode that will then be implemented by the SDETs. So then they're going to need page object training, right? If we have some page objects exist, they have to start learning how to actually write programming and use page objects to call methods and call properties in order for stuff to work. They'll also need IDE training, because now they'll be using the IDE on a regular basis. And of course, anybody using Cucumber will require regex training. Regex training, why you need it? Because you need to know whether you can pass in a string or an integer, what happens, and how to handle those kind of different options. So on the other hand, if you try to have the SDET creating the step definition, the nice thing here is they don't need any of the training overhead in terms of automation, but they still will require all of the Cucumber training. Just again, if we're using a tool, we have to get trained on it. And so this part is explanatory. So pretty inefficient process, right? So how do we make it more efficient? Well, we can actually not having testers doing the coding part of the automation. So notice all of the green and orange bubbles that disappeared from here into this scenario here, right? Right away, it got automatically smaller. And this is my kind of third tip, my pitch for this is probably, if you're going to do it, this is the most efficient way to do it. You have the manual tester coding the scenario in a feature file. Everybody starts there. And so the manual tester is going to require all the training we talked about before, which is the automation training and the Cucumber training. And then just let the SDET handle all the rest, implementing step definitions, implementing page objects, doing all the framework stuff. Why is that the best? Because the SDET is already the technical individual that does this on a regular basis. So they don't need all the extra training to make that happen. So the manual testers can just do that and just hand it off, and that's it. Cut off there. No implementation, no technical implementation with manual testers. And then that is the most efficient approach. Now, my question to all of you is, can we make this process even more efficient? If we're trying to have automation that's as efficient as possible with the least amount of overhead, right, with the least amount of training, and then after that, the least amount of maintenance, after that, the least amount of learning over time and needing to adapt to the tools. Can we do it? Yes, we can. And that's actually simply by just removing Cucumber from the equation. Now, if you're not following the BDD process, you shouldn't be using Cucumber at all, as told to us by all Cucumber experts. But look at all the bubbles that are gone from here. Remember all the green bubbles that we had before? Here, this is training required by anybody using Cucumber. These bubbles disappear. And so we're just left with a very fundamental automation training that anybody needs who's actually doing test automation. The manual testers are still getting the IDE training. They're still getting the framework training. Now, the extra training they would need is how to use page objects, because if you have page objects that already exist, they can just use it. They can start writing, for example, new Google homepage dot search and type in the string, right? They can do then Google search results page dot click first result, something like that. They will need training there. That is an extra overhead added here versus the other ones, but it does remove all the other extra tooling training that is necessary, which, again, all of this extra tooling training that is required here for anybody, either for the manual tester or the SDET. The SDET just does what he always does, and then the manual testers can help by simply just writing tests using the page object pattern. And that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Yeah, if you don't, just put your camera back on, Nikolay. I knew you want to get into don't use BDD. So that's funny. Yeah, so folks, all right, Gil, do you have any questions? Just get your questions in, click on the questions tab, and get your questions for Nikolay. Nikolay, if you could turn your camera back on, just close your presentation. Should be good.
Sorry, turn my camera back on?
Yeah, because all I see is your presentation right now.
My camera is on. You mean you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Yes, perfect. There you are. Awesome. Okay. All right, Nikolay, let's get some questions. Rebecca says, oh, I don't understand the question. Did you say if you're not using BDD, then not to use Cucumber? I think Cucumber and BDD are pretty much the same thing. Cucumber is an implementation of BDD. But don't know, Rebecca. Rebecca did have another question earlier, which says, if you don't assert, are you happy for the code to just be lines of code clicking elements after each other? I usually have an assert after every time I click an element. Hope my question makes sense.
Oh, I guess, interesting. I wonder if what Rebecca is saying is, let me see, go back to my code here. Oh, and I'm not sharing my screen anymore. Let me see here. Let me share it again.
Sure.
So everyone can look at what I'm looking at here. Hey, Joe, can you see that?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I wonder if what Rebecca is saying, right, is if we're not doing page load checks, we're not having an extra assertion here, right? Open page and then assert, does element exist? And is that a problem? I think that's what she's saying. I would say no, it's not, that's not a problem, because really your assertion is right here. The driver.find element will be that assertion. And ultimately, we're not really interested if that element is present. What we're interested in is after some action occurs here, then we want to make sure that an element is present, right? So like here, for example, we'll log in, and after we do the login action, we will validate that the user will successfully log in. At that point, you have your assertion, and in which case our test is, can user successfully log in? For a page load test, that's a totally unnecessary test, because this smarter test, login test, will already check that for us. And so we don't even need to write it. I hope that answers your question.
All right, Rebecca, just let me know if you want some clarification there. To me, it almost sounds like, we're always told before you click on an element, you need to make sure it's available. Just help flakiness. So are you saying we don't need that, or are you just saying in this particular case, this one particular case, that you don't need that extra assertion?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Joe. Yeah, I'm happy you asked that, because there could be some confusion. Now, this is totally different from element synchronization, right? Element synchronizations we do with expected conditions and the WebDriver wait class in Java. So yes, in this case, I am not showing you all the correct thing here, which is a good point. Maybe I need to update the code. If I was to do this in production level code, I would have a WebDriver wait class here, and my WebDriver wait would have checked for some specific condition of this element, and then it would have interacted on that element. So I still would do the synchronization on an element before interacting with it, and not every single element, only the first element of the page, because usually after our page is rendered, it's there, the HTML is there, and we no longer have to wait, after which point driver.find element is sufficient. Does that answer your question, Joe? Clear it up?
Yeah, because that's what I was confused about. And Rebecca just wrote in the comment, she's, for example, what she does is she clicks a button, then she sees if she could see the title, then she enters text, and then she makes sure she could see a message before she continues with the next interaction. But I don't think you're saying not to do that in that case.
I'm saying don't write a test that opens the page and makes sure that the page is loaded. For example, as I did here in my example.
Yep.
This test is totally redundant because this test will already check for what
Right.
that test was doing. That's part, yeah, that's really mainly it. And so any kind of really, so now let's take this to the next level. Let's pretend this test was finished and it finished the login, right? On the next page, you can have a login test that's checking that you're successful. But let's pretend after that you want to expand your login scenario and you want to do some stuff on the next page. In that case, if you're going to be doing some stuff on the next page, you don't need to be checking that the user was successfully logged in, because your next action that you were going to do, maybe add an item to a cart or whatever you wanted to do, will validate it, because again, you'll get a no such element exception when the element you're trying to interact with isn't there.
Absolutely. Nikolay, I don't know if this is related, but I think you mentioned API. I think if you have one test that doesn't log in as a real user, you could then use an API to log everyone else in to help speed it up, right? Because you don't want to have duplication across every single test. Is that a strategy you recommend? Does that make sense as another thing to, as another tip you would recommend folks try?
Yeah, awesome tip, Joe. 100%. This is getting beyond 3 tips, so I don't know if I should be sharing anymore. Changes the title of my presentation, but no, Joe's absolutely right. Actually, pretty much nobody these days should be testing a login through the UI. Every web application has an authentication API, and so all that really is you provide valid username and password. You hit an API, you get a cookie back, you drop the cookie in your browser, the user successfully logged in. That's how you test a login. I've actually heard that logins can even be tested through a unit test. I don't know how to do that. I need to research that deeply, but I think if that is the case, then a login should be tested at the unit level, and none of us should ever be testing it through the UI layer. And then if you do want to speed up your test, kind of as Joe talked about, definitely use APIs for login. And I actually have a really deep article on my blog. I don't know if it's okay to share. Joe, it's a free resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So it's, if you just go to my site and search for automation patterns and anti-pattern, it's actually on the landing page. This talks about like a bunch of the tips that I mentioned. And so if you want to read about it with like code, details, and it has a bunch of different patterns. Some of them, actually most of them that I mentioned here are not on this article because these are pretty new, but a lot of them, if you want to read about in detail, they are here and totally free.
Nikolay, we'll add a link in the chat for that. I believe it's based on the same article we went over in my in our podcast, right? 11 automated testing best practices, that one?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, cool. And I forgot I wasn't sharing my screen, right? I was like showing my
paste that in.
Yeah, I'll throw it in the chat right now for everyone.
I put it in the chat, so we're good. So just so you know, Nikolay,
Yeah,
I forgot to tell you, what you're seeing is not what folks are seeing, so they're in a totally different website than you are. So they're not going to see that chat. So I put it in the official chat for them. Awesome.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
What were you going to say, Nikolay? I think I cut you off.
I don't remember anymore. No worries. All
right, Guild, get your questions in. We have a few more minutes for Nikolay. As he mentioned, he's very busy. I know they're putting on their first online event for SourceCon next week. And I'm sure he's highly involved there. So, Nikolay, any sneak peeks? I guess that's a free event as well, right? So what are you talking about at SourceCon online?
Yeah, Joe, awesome. Yeah, that's an absolutely free event, and I hope that everybody joins here. It's packed with like amazing speakers and amazing information, and it's absolutely free. I don't know if anyone knows, SourceCon is usually like a live conference, right, where you have to pay a few $100 to get a ticket. So now it's totally free because of this whole COVID thing, you know. But so, okay, so my sessions there are, I'm going to be doing one session on creating an automation framework in under 60 minutes, where I'll basically take you from complete beginning to a production level automation framework that can be run in parallel, cross-browser. And I'm even going to try to integrate it into a continuous integration pipeline. Let's see if I can do it. I'm like training now. Hopefully I can do all of that in 60 minutes. That's my goal. So that I'll do that session both in US and Europe. Tuesday is US, Thursday is Europe. And then we have another session with me, my coworker Titus, and Josh Grant. And we're talking about automate, how to fix your Cucumber automation once and for all, where we're going to answer like some of the most hardest Cucumber questions that we've gotten in the past. So those are at least my sessions, and then there's like some panels that are going to be happening and many other cool sessions. Go check it out, SauceCon online. You guys will be able to find them. And I can add a link, or I'm sure Joe knows the link.
Yeah. So Nikolay, I actually thought about it this week. I hosted an online event for another company, Appley Tools, and one of the speakers was from GoodRx, and she actually had really good results with BDD. I know you mentioned you and your coworkers have never seen anyone that had a successful implementation with BDD other than the creator of BDD. So don't know if that's still true or not, but I thought I have to have Nikolay talk to this person because it sounded really cool what they were doing over there.
Yeah, Joe, I would love to talk to that person, and that's still true. However, Ask Like Hellsoy did do an amazing presentation a few weeks back on Cucumber Electron with BDD, and it was phenomenal. I was like, man, if I can learn how to do Cucumber like that, I will start recommending Cucumber to everyone. It's exactly how we should all be doing test automation. Just kind of give you all a little bit of overview. It basically, he had, let's say, 10 tests that you could, through command line, run as unit tests, as UI tests, or as API tests. Same exact test, just by changing command line, they'll run at different levels. That's exactly how we all should be doing test automation. And I've been trying to do it for years, but it's really hard, and he did it, and that's phenomenal. But most people are not Asked Like Hellsoy and doing something like that. I need to learn how to do that myself.
It's a great tip. I had him on my podcast, another shameless promotion, and he talked about this approach where, you can almost do component level automation and not have to worry about these end-to-end tests. Do tests really fast, really quick, API, UI type things. Awesome. So we have one last question I think we can get in here. Nikolay, I want to respect your time. It's from Chris. Well, it's two questions. One's from Chris. He wants to know, do you document your page objects classes or rely on self-documentation? Like what actions are available? What data is needed?
I'm a strong believer in self-documenting code. So there's a really good book by Uncle Bob Martin, who's like a developer of like 50 years, Clean Code. Take a read. It's really nice. I forget exactly what he says, but it's basically kind of just a summary of it. He basically says that if you need to put comments in your code, then you kind of failed as a developer, because your code should be so readable when people look at it that people just understand what it does. So I believe that. If you think commenting is good in code, I'm not against that either. That's just the philosophy that I try to follow.
Oh my gosh, I can't go off because we're going to go out of time, but absolute readability. If you find yourself writing a comment, I think you have a problem, because it shows that your code is not readable. Even for yourself, if you go back a year of what code you're in and you don't make it readable and you're relying on comments, forget about it. I don't think it's going to go well. So that's a great tip. So Nikolay, like I said, I want to respect your time. We have 1 or 2 minutes left. Do you have time for a few more questions?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy.
Okay, so Shanky wants to know, if an organization is already using a Cucumber framework and it's not possible to remove it, any tips on onboarding manual testers in that case?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is where my kind of diagram applies. And that's the reason why I actually created it, is because of this common situation that we keep facing as solution architects working with larger clients or even smaller clients that are in that situation. And I'm like, I'm just going to stop fighting it. So I'm going to stop telling people to not use Cucumber and help provide at least like a more efficient way to do it. And so, yeah, that's where my diagram kind of comes into play. If you're already in that organization, this is kind of what I would try to follow, right? I would have the manual testers, coding scenarios in a feature file. Whoever is running the organization will have to provide them this training. The subject matter experts in automation we'll need to provide the manual testers training. Look, I got to say this. Many organizations fail to train people, and that's super frustrating. They throw all of us into these projects, especially automation, thinking that we can just do it just in a few weeks of just random trial and error. And test automation is a software development experience. And if we're not going to give manual testers software development tasks, why are we giving them test automation tasks? So training here is absolutely critical. So they need to be trained in this and in this. And then I think they can create the scenarios, and then the SDETs or the developers can handle all the technical aspects, and they can support the features that are coming out from the manual testers. I think that's the most efficient way to do it.
Absolutely. All right, Nikolay, last question is from Stella, and I think I know your answer. I think a lot of times people confuse techniques and tools with being problems, when it's usually the implementation of the tool or technique that's the problem. But anyway, the question is, currently the automation test industry, in the test automation industry, is BDD the best approach? So if you're saying BDD, you've never seen it really implemented well except one time, what approach do you recommend? And I think you talked about this already with one of your slides with the page object type deal for the manual testers. So any thoughts around what's the best approach for automation testing in 2020?
Yeah, I think in terms of, we're going to talk about in terms of UI test automation. If we're going to tackle it at all levels, I believe in the automation pyramid and doing as much, even though I am a solution architect for a company that focuses on UI test automation. We strongly always encourage all of our customers to do the majority of their testing at the unit layer and the API layer, with a tiny little piece at the UI layer. And so now, if we're talking about that little piece at the UI layer, I think just a standard page object pattern can be sufficient. Why? Because even if you're going to use Cucumber, for example, for test automation, and even if you do it well, to the best of your abilities, underneath, for every step definition, what are you going to have? You're going to have page objects that actually implement your logic to interact with the pages. So why not just get rid of that whole layer and all that extra training and just use the page object pattern instead, which can be done, if it's done well, it can be very sufficient. And so again, just a lower barrier to entry, keeping it simple, kind of just my standard practices that I try to follow every day. And so, yeah, that's kind of the approach that I would go. And I would actually recommend you come check out our Automating with Cucumber, Fixing Your Automation with Cucumber Forever talk between me, Titus, and Josh. We'll probably answer more of your Cucumber-related questions there at SauceCon. It'll be on Tuesday. I forget what time, but there's a calendar there that shows.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikolay, for your automation awesomeness. Any parting words of wisdom you want to leave the guild?
Thanks so much for having me, Joe. Always a pleasure. Love your blue office. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to pay attention to me on Friday afternoon. And if you have any questions, reach out to me, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm there, happy to help you, talk to you about anything. And yeah, I guess just my parting thought of wisdom is just keep it simple. You know, always with everything, I just find that simplicity is kind of just best. If you can think about 2 choices or 3 choices and think, which one is the most simplest one? Most likely, most of the time, that is the right choice. So just try to follow that philosophy in everything. 2 choices, programming choices, just keeping it simple, getting minimum viable product out there as fast as possible, and then iterating on it.
Great stuff as always, Nikolay. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much all you do for the community, and we'll check you out next time. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Cheers. All right, so that was Nikolay. A lot of folks have asked, are you getting recordings of this? Yes, if you registered, you will get a recording. I try to edit out myself at the beginning and at the end, so I will send you a link to the recording after the event is over sometime next week, either Monday or Tuesday. Check your emails. But thank you, everyone, for joining. Like Nikolay says, I know it is late on Friday, but I think it's kind of fun to do this. This is the 5th one. Hopefully you're finding value out of these free sessions. And I appreciate you all for joining and for everyone contributing and asking questions. It's always an awesome time for me because I also learn together with you. So thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Next time we actually have, just a reminder, before we go, just a reminder, this edition of the TestGuild Automation Meetup is sponsored by Testum. And Testum wants to give back to the community during this time of need. So make sure to check out their free community plan, which now includes 1,000 runs per month. And the runs last forever, but the offer won't last. So sign up below, lock it in. Click on that link. Like I said, they are sponsoring this event. So really appreciate them doing that. And next week, hopefully I'll see you here as well. We're going to have Shane Evans join us. He's the founder of GameDriver.io. And he's going to share how to automate your testing of video games using GameDriver.io. So really fun topic, I think. A lot of people are doing a lot of gaming during this time because they're home a lot. And if you want, hey, I wish I could automate this, this could be a great session for you. So thank you, Eric. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Alaski. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Eve. Thank you, Anupam. Thank you, Shanky. Thank you, Stella. Thank you, everyone, for asking your questions. Really appreciate it. Any questions for me at any time, hit me up at joe@testguild.com. And also, we have a online conference dedicated to performance testing coming your way in 3 weeks. To check that out, go to perfguild.com. That's it. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.